Welcome Lights Out family to another episode of After Dark with KK. Have you ever caught the famed 1980s Italian movie Cinema Paradiso? The communal village cinema was as highlighted in the movie and described as a paradise for some who wanted to go there to lose themselves in the movies that had been screened. In our part of the world, while we enjoyed going to cinema to catch the latest blockbusters, indulging in the concessions, and basically immersed in the overall Cineplex experience, it was well known that the constantly dark theatre, without the exposure to natural sunlight, will become a haunt for the supernatural. While there have been historical records of cinema in Taiwan and Hong Kong experiencing fire outbreak due to the flammable nature of the nitrate film, even in Singapore we have heard of eerie cinema toilets with female ghosts looming around. Today's story seemingly was well known in the region of origin and was extensive in the records of the hauntings experienced by the author and his family. During my childhood in the 1970s, I grew up in a rural village and the family was not well to do. Things got a bit better when father secured a job as the cinema custodian located in the bustling village centre. As the cinema was located quite a distance from our house, father would stay in the custodian lodging in the cinema building and only returned home once or twice a month. When I was old enough to be eligible for elementary school, father felt I should attend the better school in the village centre, and without the financial ability of buying a house in the area, father managed to negotiate with the cinema owner to move the entire family, including my paternal grandmother, to lodge at the front wing of the cinema building, which had ample rooms for lodging. By this point, mother also got a job to prepare and sell concessions to the cinema patrons. To me and my younger brother, we were immersed in the new living environment, but even at that tender age, I could sense the apprehension of the adults with the place itself. Apparently, the previous incarnation of the building was a multi-functional hall for assembly, Chinese opera performance, as well as playing the movies since the 1950s. It was shoddily constructed with wooden frame and zinc-plated roof, and during a wild thunderstorm, the structure actually collapsed due to weak foundation. Fortunately, no one got badly hurt, but the people in town had a ghastly discovery of carcasses of thousands of snakes. It was apparent the cinema ground housed a bed of snakes, and from the account of the workers who cleared the debris, it was countless of snakes of all sizes. To those who were superstitious, they felt that the location of the cinema was extremely in, which inoculated a string of scary occurrences that followed. After the cinema was rebuilt with brick and mortar, it was temporarily used as a judicial court for a while. The young chap was adjudged to be guilty of manslaughter and had been sentenced to death, much to the intense sorrow of his mother, who had been adamant her son was being framed. After the judgment had been passed, custodians of the building would one day smell something pretty awful emanating from one of the rooms at the second floor of the hall beside the projector room, only to discover the decomposed body of the aggrieved mother. Another gruesome incident was when the building had become a full-fledged cinema and became a haunt for gangsters and ruffians to hang out. During one particular screening, opposing gangs started to get into a heated altercation, and the physical commotion that filled the entire hall created some chaos. And before anyone could escape from the commotion, one ceiling fan fell and killed one innocent patron. I was certain there were many more of such morbid stories to paint the ominous history of the cinema building, but the adults simply kept it away from us kids. But as we Chinese said, the paper could never contain a fire, and eventually I will be informed of the ghostly entities that had been haunting the premise. One evening, my paternal uncle came to visit my grandma and innocuously asked if my father had still seen her. It was evident grandma wanted to hush uncle from bringing this up in my presence, but eventually uncle felt since I was living here, I had the right to know what was happening. Before he departed, uncle secretly revealed why for the longest time, when father was living in the quarters before we moved in, he was sleeping every night without turning off the light. Whenever he turned off the light, he could see a lady ghost in all white, just staring at him menacingly. From that day onwards, I was on high alert with the rooms at night, and any slight sound would keep me awake. However, I was lucky to not see anything, and eventually time eroded any existing fear I had with these stories. Not before too long, the supernatural phenomenon would rear its ugly head. Grandma would periodically stay with Uncle, leaving me and my brother sleeping alone in the room on the right hand side of the front wing. Our parents' room was located on the left hand side on the same second floor. There would be a dark spiral staircase leading to the concession booth on the main lobby, which was adjacent to the main two-sided door of the theatre. That night, while the family would be going through the usual activities prior to sleeping, all of us could hear audible banging of the door. As the two of us were curious to find out who was making a din at this time of the night, we could see the back of our father sauntering down the spiral stairs into the darkness. Father could be heard opening the front door of the building, calling out to Uncle Lee, who was an assistant working in the cinema and lived nearby, so it was assumed that he would be the most probable person to come over this time of the night, especially on the night when there was no screening. However, there was no response from Uncle Lee, and not before too long, Father would return to our living quarters and beckon us boys to go to sleep. Even in the dark, I could visibly see how shaken my father was, and without uttering a word, he made a signal to Mother, who was also waiting for him, visibly looking shaken as well. Then we heard the loud bang. It was apparent the banging came from within the theatre hall, like someone was inside, frantically asking to be set free from the chasm. Father's expression immediately turned from being scared to resigned to fate, as he picked up a metal rod from the walkway and made his way to the entrance of the hall. Mother would follow him, armed with a torchlight. As we were strictly not allowed to follow them, this part of the story was privy to me from my mother when I grew up. When my parents made their way to the wooden doors of the hall, Mother said she could still see Father fighting within himself for a while, before heaving a deep sigh and opening the doors of the theatre hall. At that instant, a cold draft could be felt streaming from within. Just for clarification, this was way before there was air conditioning installed, and we were in the middle of a summer, and the hall was all out of ventilation with the windows all sealed. So what could be the source of the cold draft? Father would then muster whatever courage he could, dragging the metal rod, whacking it on the floor, sort of like intimidation towards whoever or whatever inside the hall that could be making all the noises. Mother would be shining the torchlight at the direction of Father to allow him a bit of visibility towards the stage, and she said she was badly shaken, therefore the light was swerving as much as her trembling. She stated that at that time, she told herself to keep her sight affixed to the floor, as she knew if she had seen any scary things in the vast space of the dark hall, she would not know how her body would respond. Yet, it was just a quick peek towards Father, who was by now near the stage, when she evidently saw a dark silhouette on the said stage. She said it was a silhouette of a headless lady, and when the entity noticed that Mother had seen her, like teleportation, she was next seen ported to the room on the second floor where the suicide had taken place before it dissipated into thin air. Mother was so taken aback by what she had seen that she dropped the torchlight, and the thud of the heavy torchlight shook Father, who was now doing a perimeter scan of the stage, and he knew Mother had seen something. He then told his wife to retire for the night, while he would hold sentry within the hall for the remainder of the night. When I heard that, I wondered if I could even emulate that bravery my old man displayed that night. I was also certain Mother could not sleep soundly after what she had seen after that. As my parents had no capability to move the family elsewhere, we just had to persevere, but I do notice Grandma and Mother would seek religious help fervently after that. While I was trying to tell myself everything would be fine on a nightly basis, my life would turn upside down from an unlikely source from school of all places. During recess, this girl who was 2 years my senior would stop me on my track.
You are the boy that lives in the cinema building now.
I nodded before she continued.
Before your family had moved in, my family were the ones living there as my father was the previous custodian. I had been trying to find the right opportunity to warn you about the scary ongoings in that location, especially at night. For the longest time when we were staying there, I could feel someone watching me when I sleep. It got worse over time as the entities residing in the dark spaces would start touching us when we were sleeping. It was not grievous, but the touching were interrupting our sleep to a point that we just had to move out of the place, even when it was financially not feasible for my family back then.
This piece of information was not what I wanted to hear, and it bothered me for the rest of the day even when I got back home that night. The mood at home was pretty somber as well. While Grandma was in her usual seat in the room watching her usual TV program, I could see my younger brother lying on the bed, which the three of us shared, snivelling with a reddened nose like she had just cried. "What's wrong now?" I asked, even though I was not in the mood to listen to his usual shenanigans. As he looked eager to unleash what was bothering him, Grandma would intervene, which left me even more befuddled. That evening, I was struggling to sleep as I was afraid I would be assaulted by some invisible sources, but I could feel constant tossing and turning on the communal bed, indicating Grandma and my kid brother too had difficulty sleeping. The following morning, Mother prepared a wholesome spread for breakfast, mostly my brother's favourite. I could not fathom the occasion for the spread, but I could see my parents giving the younger son the carte blanche to just fiddle with the food, picking out anything he wanted to eat. As I tried to stop him after a poor night of rest and generally pissed off by his behaviour, my father would interject and let him go scot-free with his misdemeanour. It seems like using food as bribery had no effect on the boy, who could not grasp that concept, and he started blabbering out what the adults were trying hard to keep me in the dark with.
Yesterday when you were still in school, I saw a headless ghost walking past our room. I screamed as I was startled by the sight, but Mother said it was just an animal, but Grandma had saw the ghost as well.
I looked at my grandmother, and from her expression, I felt the little boy was not lying. Even before I could recover from what had transpired, my brother, who had turned towards the kitchen, suddenly screamed at the top of his lungs, and then my mother started throwing a porcelain bowl towards that direction, trying to scare off whatever was looming there. She said it was a cat, but she was a liar with pants on fire, because my brother was breaking down as claiming it was the same headless ghost. At this point, my parents looked overwhelmed and lost. The haunting now came in such high frequency, and even during the daytime. I knew I should not say anything to add on to their woes, and hastily finished up my breakfast and left for school. The entire time in school, I was unable to pay attention in class and to anyone else. When the last bell rang to signal the end of school, I just sat on a bench in the assembly area, pondering on how I would be able to continue living in a place so blatantly haunted. At this moment of pondering, I saw a much welcome face with the scholar from our class, Tian. Like myself, coming from the rural area of the village, the school made special lodging arrangements for Tian, who had been scoring good grades in his academics and therefore highly regarded by the principal and the faculty, to stay within the school premise in a makeshift dormitory inside the public announcement system room. I had hung out with Tian many times in his dormitory and knew it was big enough to house another person, therefore asked him sheepishly if I could board with him for the remainder of the senior year, as we can accompany each other to work on the final examination. That, my friend, you can see I was lying through my teeth, but at the moment, it was a convenient option. Tian of course agreed on the proposal, and perhaps some company would be a welcome change as well for him. I invited him for dinner that evening, and he duly obliged. When we were near the cinema building, I could see my parents waiting outside. My grandmother and younger brother were visibly absent, and father said they would be lodging at my uncle's place for a while, and I felt that was another good decision made. Together with the leftover breakfast from the morning, mother cooked up a spread to welcome Tian, who had not had such sumptuous home-cooked meals for a while. It was during dinner when I revealed to my parents about my desire to bunk with Tian in school, using the ease of transport and academics as the reasons. I could evidently see the sense of relief from my parents with my brilliant option. Mother then handed me a hefty sum of money, telling me to just dine out during my stay in school if coming home for a meal seems troublesome. While I was having a sentimental moment of feeling like leaving my parents on the lurch, Tian suddenly asked my father if the building had other residents. It seems like he had seen someone moving around on the second floor where our rooms were situated. The hair from the back of the three of us stood at that moment, yet father fabricated the lie of a part-timer cinema helper was staying around there when we knew what Tian had actually seen. After dinner, my parents sent the both of us on our way back to school, and Tian kept affixed at the second floor of the building. I did not ask him what he was looking at, and I was too scared to look at it myself. A few months had passed, and I was engulfed in mugging for the exams and did not come home that frequently. When I came back after completing the examination, I finally had more time with my family, and that was when my grandma gave me the complete story of that day when herself and my brother saw the headless ghost. It was not a simple accidental sighting, as the ghost made an intimidating approach towards my poor brother to a state that he was in an intense panic attack that afternoon and took a while to cool him down. That evening, as expected, he did not sleep well, and then the second sighting in the morning during breakfast, which really ruined the psyche of my brother. After I left for school, he developed a high fever, and father had brought him to see the doctor before sending him and grandma to uncle's place to tide things over. Uncle had engaged the help of the temple he knew to pacify my brother's mental condition before he slowly got better. Grandma said the ghost in the cinema was not of kind nature. They wanted my family out for some apparent reasons. The entities did succeed to some extent, but my parents were headstrong and posed as the final barrier. During the months of my stay in school, my parents were busy with the screening of movies and the tedious chore of maintaining the cinema hall. One evening after screening, mother was at the projector room, rewinding the nitrite film of the movie screened, and her attention was caught of a person in all black wandering on the stage. As she was worried that someone might be lost, she came down to the stage only to realize no one was there. She was getting a bit flustered, but still she went through the rear exit of the stage and down the stairwell, hoping it was truly a cinema patron. As she moved downwards, she could evidently felt someone breathing at her rear, and when she turned around, she had saw the same dark entity would run up the stairs in an uncanny speed. She was beyond petrified there and then, and from that day onwards, my parents agreed to do everything together in the evening. One evening, when mother was preparing dinner, she could hear sobbing emanating from their bedroom. On instinct, she suspected another case of haunting, only to find it was father weeping while sitting on the bed. Father then told her that while he was fixing the projector that afternoon, he saw someone prancing about the dark hall, and when the person walked up on the stage, he could clearly see that it had taken the form of father himself. Feeling frustrated, father had thought of confronting the entity, but when he came down, the doppelganger had disappeared, only to reappear as a featureless dark entity with only beaming white teeth, smiling at father's folly at the exact location where the ceiling fan had dropped and killed that patron years ago. That encounter had broke father that day, as he felt truly helpless. He wanted so badly for the entire family to move away from this haunted abode, but being wallowed in poverty, it would take a while before he could save enough money to do so. Eventually, with development of our village, my parents were able to apply for a small apartment from local government, which was barely big enough for grandma, my brother and myself, and at this point I was in middle school. There were better furnished cinema with latest technology in nearby towns, which took away quite a chunk of business for father's cinema. Therefore, he was glad a touring Chinese opera troupe had made an agreement with management to do an extended run in the cinema building. During their stay, my parents gladly prepared whatever lodging for the members of the troupe. Father, though, told the troupe leader that the innermost room in the rear wing was only meant for the main percussionist, preferably the drummer, as it was a tradition the cinema custodian had to follow. As the drummer who had brought his wife, who was also part of the troupe, and their infant during the tour, the family of three happily resided in the innermost room. It started quite innocuously, as the presence of more people residing in the building did bring life to an otherwise dreary building. Then one winter night, when the drummer wanted to close the window before retiring for the night, he left a frightful shriek. It drew the attention of many troupe members. Before he said he simply lost his footing, that's all. After everyone went back to their respective resting areas, it was not too long before the drummer, and this time with his wife and kid, ran out of the room screaming, disregarding what they were wearing at the moment, and the infant of course was crying profusely with his parents' frantic reaction. My parents who were still awake at the moment might have some idea what had happened, and led the hysterical family to calm down and rest in the room where I used to stay in. Eventually, the drummer unraveled his creepy encounters. It started with him reaching his hand outward to close the window. As his attention was towards his family, he did not take notice of anything outside. Just then, he could feel an icy cold hand brushing against his hand, which caused him to scream. It was very real to him, but he tried his best not to think about it. Little did he realize, the scare would escalate the moment he switched off the light and was about to sleep. The wife complained it was getting stuffy in the room and requested to keep the window slightly ajar. As the drummer went to do so, what appeared in front of him was a dismembered head with a pale face and stern eyes protruding, staring at him. Both the wife and the drummer were thoroughly frightened by the horrifying sight, which led them to flee from that room. After that scary incident, and compounded by the ailing attendance of their performances, the troupe decided to end their run early and leave for their next port of call. Another half a year later, we welcomed new residents to fill the vast space. Even as my family was below the middle-level financial class, there were people of worse-off state. Amao, an odd-job worker, was one of these people teetering to make ends meet, and with a wife and a 4-year-old son, he had a hard time finding a roof over his head when his previous landlord left them homeless. As Amao had been doing some repairs for father around the cinema, father knew him quite well and sympathized with his predicament. With permission from the management, father had allowed the family of 3 to live in the cinema building. The arrival of the family livened things up again, and together with their pet dog, the kid would scamper around the entire building like it was their playground. That said, Amao's son was an affable boy, and all of us had affection towards the toddler, especially myself, who had an affinity towards the boy and always engaged him in a game of Chinese chess whenever I came home, and he would beat me every single time. One day after his daily wandering of the theatre hall when there was no screening planned, innocently he would come up to his mother and said the following.
I saw a headless Superman in the hall. He could leap from the audience seats to the second floor and similarly jump down from the second floor to the seats. I think he wanted to teach me how to do it the next time.
While Amao's wife was puzzled at what she had heard, my mother, who was there, knew exactly what the boy was talking about and what room at the second floor the Superman came from. My parents explained the hauntings to Amao and his wife, and they had actually heard of rumors of the place before moving in. After that day, they barred the boy to play inside the hall even during the daytime and granted him time outdoors. While Amao's wife would tend to keep a watchful eye, and with the company of the pet dog, everything seems to be fine and dandy. But it was of human nature for human beings to feel lax when it became a routine. So one afternoon, the boy went to one of his favorite places, which was a drain where he could catch streams easily. The drain itself was not too deep, and the boy had known the place like the back of his hand. One strange thing was the behavior of the dog that day. It was not too keen to join the boy. In fact, it was putting an effort to stop the boy from going. That evening, I came back for dinner to find the family all being solemn and quiet. Even the usually boisterous brother was unusually quiet and just focused on his dinner. As usual, I would call out to Amao's boy for a chat, but this evening the boy did not come running over when I called out to him. Soon after that, I could hear the incessant sobbing of Amao's wife, who had been consoled by mother in their room. This was when father informed me of the tragic news of the boy being drowned in the drain that afternoon. I could not control tears from streaming down my cheeks. It was a gut punch to me. To people who had no prior knowledge of this particular location, this was an unfortunate accident, but all villagers knew that the place had claimed another life. So sad it had to be one so young and innocent. Amao and his wife moved out of the wretched building not long after, as did my parents when the management had sold to a developer to refurbish the place to catch up to the times. Thinking back of all these scary and at times morbid travails, my family, as well as anyone who had stayed in the building over the years, it gave me concrete evidence that aside from it was a torture to even contemplate living in it, my parents had been making such sacrifices for the well-being of the family. They had always think about us first and foremost, to a state that they forgo their own safety. For that, I will always be grateful to them. If you have been paying attention, at the start of the story, the author has said that the place is a very in locality. To some spiritual or feng shui masters, there would be ways to alter the fate of the land, which of course the owners had overlooked. In many Chinese-speaking supernatural programs I've watched, the content creators would always use this golden line, 穷比鬼还可怕, meaning it's much scarier to be poor than being haunted. But in this case, the serial haunting would push many mere mortals to the brink. The parents of the author surely had the immense will to persevere in that kind of environment. Hope you all had enjoyed this epic story, which I certainly enjoyed sharing. And if you could do it, please help me to click that like button and share with anyone who would like it too. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel as well. Perhaps next time you go to your local cinema, have a look at the dark crevices and see if you can see something unnatural. Good night.